Welcome back to another episode of Singapore's Real Estate Explained, brought to you by the J&A Investments team. This is Grace.
This is Christian. And before we start, let's update some things in our lives. Recently, for our J investment team, we have a new mascot.
New mascot.
It's white, it's fluffy, and
if you guys want to know who it is, go to Jervis' Instagram account.
And you'll find out more about that.
Maybe next time we invite
the mascot
on our Real Estate Explained series.
Yes, but it's quite exciting because it has been a dream to have our own office mascot. Okay?
Yes.
So stay tuned.
And I don't know if this video will be posted before National Day, but if it does, then you'll hear Chris singing, "This is home."
Grace will sing. I hope if J&A team leaders are actually having a NEP song to show our love for Singapore.
I hope they auto-tune our voice nicely.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Okay, so let's start today's video. It's a topic that everybody, a lot of people has been asking us about. Ultimate question of new launch versus resale. Which one should they consider in the market? So this is also something that we'll break down to you guys today in terms of whether the pros and cons for each option, what is the cost, and who should consider resale and who should consider new launch.
And most importantly, about looking at the profits, how much can they make in the resale and new launch, and which is better. So there's something that people always say, new launch make more than resale. Or some people say resale make more than new launch. So what exactly is the case?
Who is the right one?
Who is the right one? Let's find out. So before we start, I'd like to thank our clients for supporting us all the way. And up to date, we have served over 500 investment clients. And we are happy to say that we have surpassed 19.56% per annum for our clients' portfolio returns. And this outbeat S&P 500, which we are very thankful for. So yes, we are more than happy to validate to you day by day, night by night, doing our research. And most importantly, if this were to surpass maybe 800 clients in the future, due to the overwhelming inquiries, we may start charging a fee. So we hope to validate as much as possible in this season. For all our clients that are supporting us, thank you. And also, some updates about our Google review. We have crossed 111 Google review.
Yep.
And this is something that is very heartwarming for us, because after selling over 2,000 homes at 80% across record PSF and close to 500 investment clients served, I say all these things is not just our own effort, but also the effort of the team, and also it's because our client support that made this possible. Yep. So once again, thank you.
Yeah, so if you guys also want to kind of understand how our team actually sell houses, we do have a Sell It series that you guys can check out also.
All right. And without much further ado, let's move on to today's topic. Grace, can you read us through?
Yeah. So I think before we even talk about like new launch or resale, right, just to bring you guys through on what kind of sales there are in Singapore, usually there is three main types. New launch, which everybody is familiar with, which you get directly from the developer. It's a new project, right? And then in between new launch and resale, there's sub-sale. So sub-sale is basically you buy it as a new launch and then you sell it, but before the CSC. So a lot of people think that if I sell it before I collect my keys, it's sub-sale. But if you collect your keys, that's TOP. Between TOP, which is your temporary occupation permit, as well as your CSC, which is 1 year later when the developer actually give you a 1 year defects liability, right? It will still consider as sub-sale.
So usually these kind of units are usually TOP units, brand new in the market. The buyers just collect the key and they are reselling into the market.
It could still be termed as a sub-sale.
Yes, correct. And then after, the third type is a resale, where basically anything that's after CSC. And that's what most of the inventory in the market are. And people always consider which one is the best. Okay, so today we'll dissect mainly new launch and resale to make a comparison.
So I think ultimately there is no one size fit all answer. There are definitely new launches, that make a lot of money, and that's why people are also pushing new launches in the market. But there are also new launches that didn't make as much. Similarly, there are resale that made a lot, and there's resale that also didn't make as much. So I think it's very specific to what you're looking at. There's always pros and cons to each. So you really have to consider like your current circumstance, and at the end we'll kind of let you know who should go for a new launch and who should go for a resale.
All right, so let's break down the difference, between new launch and resale. So the first thing that we will look into is this about costing. Costing of owning a new launch versus a resale. So you can see in this table we have summarized what exactly are the cost. We start with MCSC fee, which is management fee. So take note, for new launch, there's no MCSC because nothing is built yet. And for resale, usually it'll be about 350 a month, on average, from ranging from a 2 to 3 to 4 beta, could be even higher, close to 400-500. All right. Next thing is property tax. So fun fact, new launch, there is no property tax, $0 as compared to resale, which is ranging, of course, based on what property price you're buying. If it's about 2 million property, it's about $2,000 a year. And also, it really depends whether for resale, you're own stay unit or
it's an investment unit. Yeah.
Rental out, it will be actually close to 2 to 3 times higher. All right. Next part is in terms of interest. So for interest wise, you can see the difference for new launch and resale. Later we'll break down in terms of the exact numbers. But in short, new launch is under this thing called progressive payment. So progressive payment, you don't pay as much interest as compared to resale. You can see in the same 2 million property, for new launch, in the next 3 years to 3 years holding period, you will be about close to $30,000 in terms of interest payment.
Yeah.
But for resale, you'll be close to $124,000. So that's
that's like multiple times, almost four times.
4 times higher.
Yeah.
And why so? Later we'll explain more why is it such a case. And this is assuming a 2.85% interest. It could be higher if the interest rate is higher.
Yeah.
All right. And next we have stamp duty. Okay, so this
is the same for both, right?
Yeah, it's the same for both. About close to 70K. This given to the government by stamp duty. This assuming you don't have any ABSD or any other taxes if you're an other nationality. All right. And the third case is more a renovation. So reno for new launch, later you will see it doesn't require a lot of reno because it's brand new.
Because Jarvis just collected his keys. So you can reach out to him for some tips on how he keep his reno down.
Yes.
You can source all your lightings, all your fans from JB. And I think it's quite a huge discount.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Same price but different currency.
Yep.
So there's something you can pop him a message. You say, I saw this video. I'm more than happy to find out the hack of reducing rental costs. But of course, for resale, the renovation cost usually will be higher because units need more painting.
I think 50K is quite a safe number to say. Usually, if you want to do a little bit more extensive renovation, if you're going to be hacking down things, right? I think today rental cost is very high because of post-COVID.
Yeah, it could be up to 100K if there is. But one thing that I'll always change, my clients will always change, it will be the toilet bowl.
Toilet bowl.
Yeah, always.
For hygiene
purposes. Yeah, so there's some things to take note.
Okay, so for new launch wise, we also have a cost. If you don't have an alternative place to stay, then of course you have to rent a place. Generally, if you were to rent, let's say, if you're okay to rent an HDB, about 3,500 to about 4,000, I would say. So let's say you take 3,500, 36 months is about 126,000. Of course, for resale wise, because you're going to be staying in the property, if that's for own stay, right, then there is no rental involved. So if you to take the cost after 3 years, comparing new launch and resale, for new launch, if you have a place to stay, you are okay staying with your parents, or you have an alternative place to stay, then your total cost will be 109,248 as compared to a resale of 262,390. So if let's say you do have to rent for new launch and you keep your rental under 3,500, then your total cost will be about 235,248. So you can see that with rental, actually the cost is pretty similar to the resale. So that's why you always have to kind of factor in. Does it make sense to rent? Because in the event where the rental cost of the place that you want, way exceeds the cost of you holding to a resale, then maybe resale could have been a better alternative.
Yes, and in fact, they are quite close when it comes to costing. So the key thing to look at is which can appreciate more if talk about investments.
Yeah, you're talking about investments,
that's why numbers is very important. Even with selecting what you are going to buy as well investment. And one thing is for resale, there's always the emotion factor. Because you're staying there, you are locked there for maybe the next 5 years or 10 years at times. So when there's more emotions given, the likelihood at times to want to factor in the idea of good investment numbers may be less. But it's something, of course, you have to consider when it comes to choosing the right unit.
Okay, so if you look at the break even, let's say you want to sell this property without making anything and losing anything, right? For the new launch wise, without rental, you'll be looking at selling it about close to about 2.1, and with rental about 2.235 million. Then for the resale wise, because you have interest, everything, you have to sell it at about 2.262 just to break even.
Yes, indeed. All right, so next, let's run through why is there a difference between the interest payment for new launch and resale. So take note for resale, okay, once you collect your key after completion, you'll be paying the full mortgage. So for full mortgage per month, to get a 1.5 million loan for 2 million property, 75% loan to value, at 2.85% interest, which is today's interest rate right now, your monthly payment was 6,200 a month. So for this monthly payment, it's split into two portions. There's one part called interest, And there's another part called principal. So out of this 6,002, 3,563 will be interest, 264 will be principal.
Which is very high in this market. So a lot of people have the misconception that, okay, I buy resale, right? It's okay for the payment because every month I'm paying. So people may have the misconception that I'm paying towards my house.
Yes.
I don't have to rent, yes, I do have to pay a mortgage, but I'm paying towards my house. But you have to break down the mortgage for interest and principal. The interest is basically something that you throw into the sea.
Yes.
You give to the bank, you'll never see it back, right? So the interest that you see here essentially is like your rental for staying at this property itself.
Yep, indeed. And only what you really pay down is the principal. So
Correct.
every single month you're losing 3,500 in this case, purely for resale. That's why if total is 3,500 in total in 3 years, you'll get 130,000. And that's how you give that number that we derived in the previous charts.
Yeah. So 3,500 doesn't actually include your property tax, doesn't include your maintenance fee, which could have worked up to be about 4,000-ish plus. So in the event that you can find a rental that is under, let's say, 4,000-ish, then it could make sense for you to rent because by you renting, your cost is actually even lower than you buying a resale and you staying inside. So you really have to kind of balance to see, what works best for you guys also.
Indeed. Meanwhile, for new launch, the difference is in progressive payment, where what you see over here is you don't pay the full mortgage right from the start. It's actually progressive in nature. And as the new launch is being built, that's when your mortgage will slowly increase. So you can see, if you were to zoom in all the way, when you first bought a new launch at launch day, okay, depending on which stage you're at, if you're at launch day, usually for the first 6 to 12 months, you don't have to worry about mortgage because
you have to look at when the developer actually built the foundation, complete the foundation. So usually to put in favor of the buyers, they may drag it out. So let's say if it's 9 to 12 months, that means basically you don't pay any mortgage and essentially no interest is being charged also.
Correct. And that's when the foundation not caught. So for the first 6 months to 12 months, usually don't have to pay. So what we see is the interest per month is 0.
Yep.
Okay. And once it starts to build, where your foundation is completed, usually takes quite some time because foundation is the most important part of the unit. What will happen is you will start to disperse 100K, okay, into the property to pay for the progressive stage. And when this 100K is dispersed, the bank will call and say, hey, 100K is dispersed. Okay, and right now you still start paying the bank loan.
Yep.
So at bank loan at 4% interest rate, it'll be $477, okay, in terms of monthly mortgage, which is quite cheaper than a room rental.
Yeah.
Okay. And the interest you pay, assuming 4%, will be $332. Okay, and that usually lasts for the next 6 months to even 12 months. Depends. And the next 6 months, it will slowly increase from 477 to 1,440. Then after that, when the third phase is completed, which you see over here, is actually your reinforced concrete. Bit by bit, when the things are done, the mortgage will slowly increase and stack until you hit this stage called the TOP, which is basically when you collect key. That is when you have the close to full-blown mortgage, 5.8. And when it hits CSC, that is when you get 7,500.
Yeah, so one thing to also note is your interest rate that you're paying, right? Because how it differs from a resale versus a new launch is that for resale, you have the option of taking whether you want to do a fixed or a floating rate. So current fixed is about 2.85, floating is about 4. So naturally, if you have the option, usually people will take the fixed lah.
The low one.
Yeah,
Yep.
but if let's say you're going for a new launch, there is no fixed option. So you can only go for the floating rate, which is about 4% at this moment. And then it changes based on how the interest rate actually moves. But upon TOP, when you collect your keys, that's when you can actually do a repricing or a refinancing.
Yes. And that's what we actually account for based on calculations to sum up all the interest that we have to create a table that you've seen just now, where we add up all the interest that's paid in the 3 years. And from there, you can see right over here below, we got about 29,648. This is the interest paid during this period of construction. And the key thing about new launch is you don't have to worry at times that no tenant, etc., will pay the full mortgage. The key thing over here is as long as set aside this amount, which is close to 45K, 43K, 443, you're actually good to go for a 2 million property, even after paying the down payment. So this gives some leeway in terms of cash flow.
Yeah, so essentially, if you were to go for a resale, in this case, let's say we're comparing a 2 million resale versus a 2 million new launch. Resale, every month you have to worry about the 6,000 plus mortgage. Of course, you can also rent it out and to cover, which we'll talk about later on. But it's just that you always have to have ready this sum of money. As compared to, let's say, if you buy a new launch, you know that in 3 years, your total payment would be 43,000. So essentially, when you buy this new launch, right, you just have to set aside this 43K in a bank then you don't have to go and think about it on like the payments that's going to come out every month.
Yep. And for resale, you can rent it out. That's something that we will account for later on. And the cash flow that you need to prepare, it will be sometimes I would say more. Okay, if it's covered, then of course it will be slightly better. Yeah, so that's something we'll dissect later. All right. So next, we actually compare the difference in a timeline between a new launch and a resale. For resale, you can see it's a typical timeline. You pay a 1%, okay, upfront to get the OTP. And subsequently, usually within 2 weeks, okay, or sometimes 3 weeks, you actually exercise and pay the 4%. Okay, and thereafter, usually between exercise date and completion date, when your bank loan is dispersed and when you collect key, usually about 10 to 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Of course, all these are negotiable.
Correct.
You can negotiate certain timelines.
So unlike HDB where a lot of things are fixed, right? Private-wise, everything is negotiable. For your option to your exercise, we've seen 6 months. Of course, if the seller is not in a hurry and you give them a higher option fee, this is something that you can kind of plan your timeline out. So this is a general timeline that usually people kind of follow.
Yes, correct. And meanwhile, for new launch, it's slightly different. It's about 8 weeks in total. Okay, so basically, instead of the 1% to get an option, you need to pay 5%. Okay, and within 2 weeks, usually the SMP will be sent to the law firm. And the law firm, once you say SMP, you have 3 weeks to exercise, to sign and say that, hey, I'm okay to go through this unit. Okay, another 2 more weeks, you have to pay the stamp duty.
Yep.
Buy stamp duty, similar to that of resale. 2 weeks after exercise, you have to pay the buy stamp duty. And okay, within 8 weeks, okay, from the time where you receive OTP, you have to pay the last 15%. Okay, so that's when it's completed. So take note, this timeline is 5% and 15%.
So total is only 20%. But usually you have to pay a down payment of 25%. So the extra 5% will actually come in when the completion of foundation is done. So like what we mentioned previously, if the developer takes, let's say 12 months to complete the foundation, then the last 5% will be paid 12 months later.
Yes, and that's when cash flow wise it will be slightly better, but of course you need to prepare for this 5%. And so that's when the loan kickstart.
Yeah, also one thing to note, right, is the forfeit. If let's say you decide not to proceed between the option and the exercise, for the resale wise, because during option you're paying 1%. So if let's say you decide not to go ahead for any reasons, you'll forfeit the 1%. But do note that for the new launch, if you do decide to forfeit, I don't know whether it's a good thing or bad thing, but the 5% is not all forfeited, right? They will refund you back 3.75%. So the developer will keep 1.25%. If let's say you do decide. But usually people will kind of think it through whether they, do people forfeit or have buyer's remorse? Yes. But that's why really just think it through because it's a huge cost to incur, right?
Yes.
Before, if you're not sure, then don't take the step forward also.
Indeed. And one thing to take note, one last thing is completion date. Okay, for new launches, if you're selling a private or selling a HDB, you can actually request for this thing called extension or option, where basically by control housing, and you can extend this date for another 8 weeks to 12 weeks to some cases even 16 weeks, but rare, case by case basis. So it is something that in terms of completion timeline, it can be pushed back, but there's a limit that you can go for, and it have COH extension, COH control housing approval. Yeah.
So basically what happens is that if you see on the screen, right, from option to exercise is about 5 weeks. But if you were to write into control of housing and tell them, I'm selling a property, but I haven't gotten the funds in and I need the funds to actually pay my stamp duty, pay my completion, what the COH or control of housing will allow you to do is to delay the exercise. So instead of 5 weeks, they can add like another 10, 12 weeks, depending on what kind of timeline you actually request to them for.
Yes, indeed. All right. So next is pros and cons.
Pros and cons. So there's always good and bad, right, to each side. So we'll just go through what the pros and cons are for the resale first, and then Chris can go down to what's the pros and cons for new launch. I think there's always, again, no right answer. So for resale, the pros or the plus point is that you can actually physically see the unit. Let's say you want to buy for own stay, right? Some people just want to have a feel of the unit, whether they like it, what's the facing like, how the wind is which is something you cannot do for a new launch because basically what you see is like a show flat.
Yep.
Friends always say show flat is basically seeing IKEA because everything is nicely done up for you. Yep. And then for resale wise, you get immediate occupancy. So you don't have to wait. You get the property immediately. If let's say you're buying for investment, of course you can rent it out and you can collect the rental immediately. Potentially, if it's an older resale, you also get maybe slightly bigger space as compared to some of the new launches. People always say, wow, the property is getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, last but not least, right, is that you'll get more options in terms of the areas. Because you can basically buy a resale in any part of Singapore, but for new launch wise, it's very limited because you have to see when the GLS is coming up, when particular en bloc is happening also.
Yeah, based on availability.
So the downside for resale, I would say, is that in today's market, you will likely be entering higher than your previous neighbors. Of course, there are cases where, previous neighbors bought very high and they lost money, you're entering lower. But in a lot of cases, that now is the peak. So you're entering higher. The cost of holding as compared to a new launch, because of your interest, your MCST fee, and your property tax, it's likely going to be higher also. And of course, being in the resale, it's a second-hand property. So if, let's say, it's not a renovated unit, then it will, compared to a new launch, you will likely see a larger scale of renovation. Then last but not least, you're not getting it from a developer. So there is no defects liability, meaning that it is as it is conditioned. You cannot go to, the previous owner 2 months later and say, hey, my pipe broke or something. They won't care, right? So that one you have to fix yourself already.
Yes, there are some cases of termites problem also. It could be inside. So that's something you have to do your duty to check before purchasing the unit.
Yep.
All right. So next part, if you were to rent out a property, okay, there's some things you have to take note. Of course, if you assume 100% rental means that there is no break lease, one thing to take note is that based on the current interest rate of 2.85%, a monthly mortgage 6,002. If you talk about this is like a 3-bedder, 2 million, 3-bedder in the market today.
Maybe it's like RCR?
In RCR area, that'll be about maybe $5,000 rental at 3% rental yield. And why we're looking at this slide is because you want to see what is the exact outflow. The cost of owning it and how much can you really get from rental if you rent out a property. So one thing to take note is if you break down, okay, the interest, which is 2.85, 3,005 per month, property tax at 500, MCSC at 350, the total running cost a month is about 4,413.
A lot higher than a lot of people expected.
Yes.
Because a lot of people think that, okay, my 5,000 rental I'm going to get immediately, right? It's like, it's gonna help offset a huge cost, but then actually the cost is very high for holding this property also.
Yes, indeed. So if you were to look at this at 5,000 rental, okay, talk about the actual outflow, because you can see the mortgage 6,002 is actually lower than the bank the money mortgage. So 5,000 is below 6,002. And in all this costs, your outflow per month is actually close to 2,053.
Yeah.
Okay, which you top up 2,053 every single month. Yeah. So even if there is 3% rental yield, doesn't mean it can cover 2.85% bank interest. That doesn't work that way. And one more thing is, even after topping up 2,000, okay, every single month, okay, for this property, which is something to take note, is that at the end of the day, your net gain, okay, from tenant paying you, netting all the costing overhead as seen on the table, you will only get about $587 per month. And you multiply by 12 months, okay, it's a bank rate 1.4% per annum. Okay, I say based on your down payment of 500,000.
Yeah, but this is assuming that the property doesn't appreciate. Like, this is just based on purely rental, right? Of course, if the property do appreciate, then that's another additional factor that we have to consider in.
Correct. So when we look at this chart, we realize one thing, that even if you rent out a property, you get a good resale property that doesn't appreciate with good decent rental yield, a non-market rental yield. What we see is you don't really make a lot from the rent portion.
Yeah.
But what we have to look at, even for resale property, is that even rent it out, is it able to be able to appreciate over time? And this is even worse if you were to stay there. You stay at this property instead of renting it out, the cost is about 4,413. So if every month, so you don't make any capital appreciation in the next 3 years, you're effectively losing money by holding on to a property that doesn't appreciate.
Yeah. So essentially, it's like you paying 4,400 as rental for you staying at this property that you're holding.
Yep, correct. All right. So next, we look into new launch. So what is the pros and cons of new launch? So first thing, the pros of new launch is that you can actually get a first mover advantage. Of course, it doesn't happen all the time. You must enter the right entry price, which we are very particular. And what will happen is developer, if you price it right at the start, they'll do this sort of price staging to slowly push up the price. Okay, and second thing is you don't really need a lot of renovation because you're getting a brand new unit. You don't do a lot of repair. So most of it is actually given by the developer. Okay, like the white goods.
Yeah,
like
your fridge, aircon, your toilet, everything is done up. Your tiles, your flooring.
Yes, all this.
You basically can live in by just installing a light.
Yeah, lights and that's all you actually need.
Yeah.
And curtains, lights and curtains. And third thing is, in terms of the pros, it has lower upfront costs because of progressive payment. So if you are waiting for a place, okay, it's like you have a place to stay. You don't need to really go and shift it immediately.
Yes.
This gives you a huge advantage of even lower upfront cost. Okay, and fourth is spike in resale. Okay, the prices had gone up in some areas, so we're closer in certain areas. So there is opportunity that we're looking at in certain regions.
Yep.
Okay, and last but not least, there's 1 year deferred liability, where basically if you collect your key, okay,
Anything
later on,
spoil, just tell the developer to help you rectify it.
yeah, and they'll just give you and do it for free.
Yeah.
So that's one good point. Okay, but of course there are cons. Cons is you can't see the actual unit. So if you realize, well, this layout, some cases
Like Jervis buy his 2-wheeler at Twinview, right? Then when he step in, he say, too small.
too small.
Sell.
Yeah, so when an actual show flat and actual unit is usually similar, but they usually put mirrors, make it bigger.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it depends. And there are cases where people go into the unit, they realize that, hey, it actually faces a construction site, which wasn't there technically.
Yes.
Like for 3 to 4 years.
So you have to envision you have to envision when you're at the show flat itself, right? How am I going? You have to envision white walls basically.
Yes, indeed. And you really also have to read the master plan to find out what is happening around the area to choose a good unit. Second thing is usually prices within the area is highest. So you have to really break the mental barrier. Am I buying at the high, the peak at the area? But of course, there are metrics you have to consider. Okay, being that you're a new kid in the block, you're expecting to pay high, but how high should I pay?
Yeah.
Right? And then third is no rental collected during this period. So there is no way you can rent a unit that's not built yet. Yeah, so you have, and in some cases, you have to rent somewhere.
Yeah.
So that will be additional costing that you consider.
So if you're buying for investment wise, try to minimize your rent. Don't go, if it's an investment, don't go rent some like crazy expensive place, right? Or if possible, stay with your parents. We always say it's a luxury in Singapore that a lot of us get to stay with our parents. Most of the parents don't chase us out.
Yeah. And last but not least, as what Grace mentioned, the pros of resale versus new launch is resale you can choose different locations, but new launch is only limited. You have to wait for that specific new
Let's
launch.
say you want to buy in East, you have to wait for like an East new launch to come out. I cannot just say, I want to buy it now and I can look at all the resale options.
And you just pop and come out. That doesn't work that way. So there's something that you have to be more selective. So next, which is one of the golden questions people are waiting for, which will profit more? Okay, would it be new launch or resale? So this is a very commonly asked question, and clients ask us multiple times. Okay, and our answer to this is it depends. Okay, so a lot of people may say, wow, new launch, make more price staging, but it may not happen most of the case. Okay, and must understand it depends on this factor called pricing. So you look back, okay, this entire chart, what we did is we plotted the PSF of average new launch price versus average resale price over 2017 all the way to 2024. You notice a trend, a very interesting trend. So if you were to look at this chart, the blue line represents the resale. Okay, we right at the bottom. The new launch represents the one at the top. So if you look very carefully in this particular chart, okay, where I draw the lines, in 2017, there was a very interesting phenomenon where we see a new launch price almost similar to that of resale. Exactly, maybe a differentiation of maybe 2 to 5%. So this is a rare phenomenon because usually as a new launch, when it's new kid in the block, it should be higher. So if you understand, people who bought into new launch, we see later on in 2017, they tend to make much, much more. Okay, as compared to those who bought into resale. Because the price is exactly the same. Why would someone buy something older? Okay, and subsequently, we noticed something very interesting. Okay, in the second phase, in 2020 to 2021, the gap between new launch and resale went by a huge margin. Okay, from less than 0%, around 1-2%, up to close to 31%, which you'll see later on. Okay, and what happened is this caused the resale market to start to move after stagnating for 3 years. So you buy a resale back in 2017, you will be like, wow, you won't even make any money. Most of it, we will see later on some example. Of course, there's some that make, which we do find interesting because of prices.
Yeah.
But most of them doesn't. Okay, and subsequently, some new launches also did make again, but for resale-wise, okay, resale-wise, it also start to climb about 30 to 40 to 50%, which you will see that come because of the widening gap between the new launch and resale. So the question now is, where are we? Okay, so something note is, yes, 31%, it has started to dip a little more to 23% from 31%, but of course we're still observing. But one thing to take note is, it's not about looking at the market and say that, wow, gap is wide, we should buy new launch, gap is cheap, we should buy in the resale, but you must understand it's always product specific.
Yeah, and it's also area specific, right? Because there are areas where new launch and the resale, the gap is like super wide, then potentially there is an opportunity in the resale market.
Yes.
Of course, if you're entering the area that the resale has already gone up because of COVID and they're at the peak and the new launch is not too far off, then potentially there is an opportunity that you can take a look at in the new launch market.
Indeed. So with this, right, okay, let's look at some cases. Okay, I think it's very important because we've been calling new launch resale. We don't want to say, new launch wins, resale wins. We have to look at the specific area, specific product and assess it. So we split this entire case study, a total of about 6 case study. We're splitting it up into 3 different time periods.
Yep.
Yeah, so the first one is actually a 2017 time period where it was during the period of easing measure, okay? So what happened, if you understand, in 2017 was that the government came up with a new easing measure. Okay, it's a very, I would say, a mild one because they reduced the 4-year seller stamp duty to 3 years. Okay, so what it means is if you were to, last time, before 2017, if you sell a property within 4 years, you'll incur a tax. But after that, they shortened this time period from 4 to 3 years.
Yes.
So that itself allow people like, hey, I
to
can
start transacting just in a 3-year time frame instead of holding it for like a 4 or 5 years.
For 5 years to reduce the cost. So first up, let's take a look at this example that happened in about 2015 period to 2017, where we have this condo called High Park Residence versus H2 Residences side by side. So you must understand, in 2015, this period was the time where the cooling measure that came in 2013 called Total Debt Servicing Ratio actually had a full-blown effect where most of the market was quiet and developer launched it very attractively into the market. Where you see, for some reason, this new launch, High Park Residence, was about 900 per square feet while the resale was selling at 1,000 per square feet.
Yeah.
So you can see price gap is negative as compared to resale.
Which doesn't make sense because usually a new launch should be more expensive than a resale.
Yes, indeed. That's why in the same period of time, you notice for H2 residences, it didn't appreciate. It was only at 2.52% negative. In fact, it depreciated a little bit in the 4 years of 2019. Meanwhile, what we see over here is that High Park Residence went up by 25.38%.
Upon TOP.
Upon TOP. So this is when new launches, wow, okay, it makes sense to go into a new launch because of this price gap. Okay. Another example I'd like to highlight is your Stars of Coven versus Coven Melody. So Stars of Coven and Coven Melody is another case of 2015. Okay. Instead of 4-year gap, it was close to a 14 years gap. Instead of price gap of huge price gap, like you can see later on examples of like 40, 50, 60%, you only see a 35.81%. So during these 4 years, 2015 and 2019, Coven Melody only went up by 8.76%. Okay, all the way to 2019, 2020. Meanwhile, Stars of Coven went up by 17.48%.
And you also see that the gap has kind of widened already from 35 to 46. So the next thing you also notice, interestingly, is that during the COVID period from 2021-ish to 2024, you have seen the spike in Coven Melody. Once the price gap actually widens, people may see more value in the resale. And then now that the price actually went up, you can see that the gap is actually pretty close between Stars of Coven and Coven Melody.
Yeah, so the key thing we look here is this gap, which we've always been tracing resale or new launch. Okay, and another example we see over here is Principal Garden versus Tanglin View. Okay, Tanglin View and Principal Garden, the difference in age is 17 years. Okay, price gap once again
wasn't the widest. It's about 34% also.
Yes, and what we notice is about 34%, as I mentioned just now. So we can see Principal Garden went up by 14.17%. Meanwhile, Tanglin View is quite flat.
Yeah, so about 6%. So I think in cases like this, right, where your gap is not the widest, you tend to see the new launch do a bit better as compared to the resale, just because people are naturally willing to pay a slight premium, factoring in that they don't have to do renovation, factoring in that they don't have to worry about lease decay. People don't mind paying slight premium for new launches. But then later we'll also take a look on cases that resale actually did or overperform the new launches.
Yes. And next up, let's take a look at another time period which was very interesting, 2019 and 2024. So the time period where people call it the COVID-19 phenomenon, where they say, wow, the price went up a lot. It's because of COVID-19, and rational is because people think that, people stay in Singapore, trapped at home, nothing, we cannot travel.
Cash rich.
Time rich and travel poor.
Just buy.
And that's when the price are going up. But of course, one key driver, if you understand, of COVID-19 was that the land bid prices, they will launch at a higher price. And there's one key factor that drive both resale and new launch. So this is a time where there's mixed signal between resale and new launch, where we see different growth. okay, for different areas. So that's when something we will dissect in a while. So first, let's bring us through this example.
Yeah, so if you look at dairy farms versus treehouse, right? I think dairy farms was launched about 2019 period. So you see that when it was launched, the gap between dairy farms and treehouse, it's about 11 years and the price gap was about 45%. So if you were to go back to our previous examples, right, you will see that 17+% and the price gap was only 70 plus years and the price gap was only 30+%. In this one, it's the age gap is smaller, but the price gap is wider. So within the same time period, yes, dairy farms did make a very healthy profit of 19%, right? But subsequently, you also see that treehouse actually went up by close to 42%, despite being a resale. But of course, you'll also notice that once this happened, the price gap then closes up from 45 to 21. So it's always a cycle, right? When the price gap becomes smaller, okay, people then look, it may make sense to go into the newer property, but of course, when the price gap is wider, then you can consider the resale also. But of course, one thing that we also want to note is that, this all happens during the COVID period. And during COVID, you see, yes, it could be the price gap, but a lot of people, why they looked in the resale at the time, because everything stopped, right? Even the construction stopped. Nobody know when COVID will end.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm going to buy a new launch if construction stopped. I don't know if COVID will end in 2024, 2027, right? So there were a lot of uncertainties. And if people needed a property, resale was all that. It was more certain in that sense. And that's why it was a black swan event, I would say, for the resale market to go up so crazily.
Looking for bigger space and have a shift in.
Yeah.
All right, so another example we'll be looking at is Treasure in Tampines versus two resale projects, which interestingly perform differently. There's one is My Manhattan, which is nearer to Simei area, and there's one opposite Changi Hospital called East Point Green.
Yep.
And the age gap between East Point Green and Treasure Tampines is 25 years. Okay, so while we see a price gap 8.88% between My Manhattan and Treasure Tampines, we see a price gap almost 70%, okay, a large price gap between East Point Green and Treasure Tampines. So it's important to look at all this price gap because at the end of the day, how they perform was very different. You can see Treasure Tampines went up by close to 26.38% from the day they was bought, launched all the way to close to TOP. Meanwhile, for that of your My Manhattan, it actually went up by about close to 20.85%. Slightly lower. But the one that championed all was East Point Green. Although it was 25 years old, very, very old. By then it was bought at the same time, 2019-2020 period. It went up by 41.57%. Okay, and the restaurant is, of course, once again, looking at the price gap. As the price gap is wider, is much further away in terms of pricing, naturally the resale will go up much more. But if the price gap is smaller, 8%, not very big for 11-year-old property, you can see Treasure outperform My Manhattan.
But one thing you also want to note is that if you were to look back at the 2016-2017 period, right, My Manhattan and East Point Green actually also had a gap. But you will see that East Point Green didn't really move in terms of pricing. So the question is then, if COVID didn't happen, right, would the resale or East Point Green have went up this high? So I think it's the I would say more of an anomaly where instead of just looking at the pricing and the price gap, there are some factors that we also cannot control. You cannot say, hey, I want
another COVID.
You cannot control this kind of events that happen. So these are also events that could affect the pricing, and these are factors that you just cannot control. So
because COVID, as mentioned just now, people really want a bigger space. They can't be cooped at home, and they just be willing to buy something into a resale. And one more thing to take note also, we compare these two different projects. You also must look at what is a capital gain, the net gain. But some cases, when you're at that period of time, 2019, 2020, there's no big bedroom size. No one is sell in East Point Green. So some people may be waiting for 1 year, 2 years, okay, but there's no inventory.
Yes.
And then meanwhile, in Treasure, there could be an inventory of a 4-bedder or 5-bedder, where clients profit 600 to 700K, and that itself very outbid waiting out for that 4-bedder, where if you buy a 3-bedder, you will make it with 300K, 400K. So this, of course, you talk about opportunity cost and what's the net returns, rather than just looking purely into your PSF and what's percentage gain. All right. So next up, we have another resale and new launch comparison, where we're Water Gardens and Yishun Sapphire. So you can see the gap is even wider, close to 80% upon launch. Okay, so at 25-year age gap, we can see while Water Gardens made about 15.62%, Yishun Sapphire went up by close to 21.13%. So once again, it's back to that price gap. The wider the price gap is quite obvious. You go into a resale, even though the age is long, we have certain criteria to look at that. But if the price gap or the quantum of the new launch and the resale is very close, that's when a new launch can be considered as a better option.
Yeah, because you could see that actually for Yishun Sapphire, if COVID didn't happen, right, the prices were quite stagnant for some period of time. So I would say that this was something that, nobody could have expected in the market. I think it's more on, whether we are going for high risk, high returns or more of assured gains. Because a lot of new launches why people actually take home like the healthy profits upon TOP, also because developer help the price stage the units. So it's more of like a artificial price movement in the market. But for resale wise, it's really based on market forces because there's no developer, there's basically no artificial price increment for a resale unit.
So the question is, who then should consider a resale? Okay, so based on investment based on the recent updates or data, we noticed that anything that's below 1.5 million for resale actually have potential to outbid a lot of the new launches. And this is basically because of the prices.
Yeah, because anything under 1.5, right, likely you'll be looking at, let's say, 1 beta. Then for 1 beta wise, because of the size, the increment per square feet have to be very high to kind of make back any of the cost. So you won't see very healthy profits over there.
Yeah, and you don't see a lot of the new launch actually matching the price of resale. Okay, but of course, case as case, if you find something that's undervalued, that's when we can reconsider. But once again, this is something that we have been tracking the data in general. Okay, so next one, people who need to consider resale is of course someone who need a space immediately and do not want to rent. Usually in the case, maybe have family and they are not comfortable. But of course, once again, if you do not have alternate place to stay and the rental cost exceed the cost of owning a resale, it's a no-brainer to go into a resale unit.
Yeah.
Okay. And last but not least, usually another age group that we notice that is 60 to 70 range or older, 55 and above, usually they want passive income.
They basically restructure the portfolio and like that's their final
home.
Home, right? And because of loan or what, they also not into the flipping game. They want something of a longer hold. Then maybe they'll consider a resale that has very good passive income.
Yeah, so it's really holding for long term rather than flipping and selling. All right. And next, who should consider resale then? So for people above 1.5 million, okay, of course there are some resale that may be better in some cases depending on your product you're looking at in different areas. But new launches above 1.5, there are some new launches that have the potential to appreciate more than resale in the same area. And also some of the prices are similar to resale, okay, in certain areas. Okay, another group of people who consider new launch is people who have alternative place to stay and the flexibility of renting. They're not so tied up about, I need to start a family right now. I need to have a big space for my children. And the key thing over here is more flexibility in terms of staying in parents' home. Usually, you end up having better cash flow in general because the cash flow that you need to down pay for a new launch is actually less as compared to
instead of 6K plus every month for a resale, right? Your new launch maybe your first year basically you don't pay anything. And then it's like 400, 600, 800, it slowly goes up. So cash flow wise, there is more freedom in it.
Yes, correct. And last 2 points is the shorter term hold. Usually new launch, you're focusing on capital appreciation to exit upon TOP. That's the main strategy. And there's something for people who want hassle-free management.
Don't want to handle tenancy. Because we do have clients that say, tenant is not as easy as if like let's say tenancy issues come up, right? It can be quite a hassle. And some people just say, I just want to buy and I just want to maybe forget about it. And 3 years later, I get to sell it and get capital appreciation as compared to someone who, let's say, okay, have to manage the tenant. If you let's say you have a full-time job and everything, right? Some people just want to have less hassle.
Yes, indeed. So, case by case basis, there is no, new launch is best, resale is the best. It's really based on the person's circumstances.
Yeah. So, I think with that, we've come to the end of the video. Whether you're considering a new launch or a resale, right? This is a guide for you to kind of go through to see which one may fit you or your family a little bit more. But you're still a little bit uncertain, you can always reach out to our WhatsApp number over here and we can go through your case to see, which option may be a better, whether you're looking for own stay or whether you're looking for investments. And also, if you're in the market and you just want to know what are some of the upcoming launches, what are some of the past launches, what are their break-even pricing, we've also consolidated a whole new launch guide for you guys. So you can also scan the QR code over here so that we can get in contact with you guys and just send you a copy.
And with that, we come to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed the analysis. And with this, my name is Christian.
This is Grace, and we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.